Despite all the national headlines Mick Cronin's getting for calling his team soft, Deshaun Foster and his recruiting team has gone out there and slowly stockpiled commits on the O-line and is targeting a piece at the tight end position in the transfer portal. Who? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast. It's your team every day on YouTube, wherever you listen to it. It's free. Thanks for tuning in. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets, $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started is UCLA has now got a total of 20 commits in the transfer portal and still more to come. Probably, most likely. So UCLA, it seemed like a few weeks ago, went from, all right, a little slow start in the portal after all those guys left. Justin Martin, TJ Harden. You had J. Michael Sturdivant leave. You had Logan Loya leave. You had a lot of pieces heading. And then you had the defensive side of things where guys are graduating, heading to the NFL draft. So a lot of key pieces on both sides of the football to make up. And then UCLA stockpiled, right? You bring in a new DB coach. You bring in new staff changes on the O-line. You try to retain your defensive coordinator, and you just make a switch on the offensive coordinator position. So the Bruins have gotten a quarterback. They've done their best to add in the receiver room. They've got a couple of receivers. They have gotten quite a few defensive pieces on the D-line, a linebacker, and an endless assortment, it seems like, of players in the secondary. And now with the two latest commits, UCLA has found themselves with 5 offensive linemen coming to UCLA via the transfer portal. The two latest ones include one from Arkansas, Tykeist Crawford, and then you've got the latest commit, KD Arnold. In my mind, I think from what you get in Crawford, more likely to play sooner than Arnold, but of course everything's going to change. You have Andy Kwan as the new UCLA offensive line coach, and the hope is for a unit that was, 114th in the FBS, I believe, at sacks per game given up, about 2.8. Close to 3 sacks allowed per game, when we're not that far off from UCLA being a factory of sending a couple of guys to the NFL from the offensive line, where they can block for DTR. That has completely turned around, and now UCLA is looking to rebuild and have a decent offensive line. UCLA has not had that in the last couple of years. Some of that maybe due to some scheme, and then other than that, you lost a lot of talent in recent years. You bring in Crawford. He's got 1 year of eligibility. This is Crawford from Arkansas. He played 4 seasons with the Razorbacks, had 6 starts in 33 total games. Did not have a lot of action in this last year. Played in 1 game in this last season. Was a 4-star prospect out of high school and initially committed to play for Charlotte out of high school and only spent 1 season with the 49ers. So UCLA sits there as a guy bringing in a top 30 offensive tackle according to the On3 transfer portal rankings. And anything UCLA is getting in the portal for the offensive line is going to help. Now, are these all the beefy 5-stars you're going to get that are going to the SEC out of high school? No, but this is a guy that went to Charlotte, found his way to the SEC, and yes, he's had limited playing time. But considering how much UCLA struggled in the O-line, they needed to go get guys. And they're getting a lot of beef, 6'5", 6'7" in these last couple of recruits. And they've played and put on some college weight. And they know what it's like to play D1 FBS level college football, which isn't what can be said for some of these youngsters that haven't played on the O-line for UCLA. And there's going to be a lot of holes in the O-line coming into this year, which is already a weak point. I like the Crawford pickup. Is he a superstar? I'm not going to go debate that right now. UCLA's got to hope that the O-line can just grow as a unit from week 1 all the way to week 12, 13, week 14. KD Arnold is a little bit bigger than Crawford. He's 6'7", 315 pounds, started the first 3 games of the year for Jacksonville State, played 215 offensive snaps, most of those in 7 games at right tackle. and then eventually found his way to special teams and had a very limited role after October 9th. So this is a guy that had a 47.3 pass blocking grade from Pro Football Focus, an Alabama kid in 2 years that's appeared in 23 overall games. All right. So now UCLA is finding ways to try and develop these players faster, quicker, put on college weight. And you've got a couple of guys that are bigger, stronger. That's where UCLA was weak, needing the strength to handle this new Big Ten lifestyle on the offensive line, trying to battle these defensive lines that they're going to face. And at some point, they're going to go face Michigan, not next year, but when they go face the Ohio States, they go face the physical fronts that an Oregon had imposed earlier this year. They don't get to face them next year, but that's just what UCLA is trying to improve upon. And they've done that. Now with 20 commits, first couple of weeks, it seemed like it was slow. TJ Harden, Logan Loya, Justin Martin, J. Michael Sturdivant, all gone. Now you've got a quarterback, a couple of receiving options, maybe one that can help in the return game as well. And this is, I believe, the second Arkansas commit coming to UCLA, if you include Jadon Wilson. And then you add on the O-line with Julian Armella. You've got the Kentucky transfer in Cortland Ford, who might be, out of those guys, most likely have an immediate impact. Armella, if you unlock his potential, like he had at Florida State, could be an immediate impact at UCLA. And then you bring in Eugene Brooks from Oklahoma. There are guys who have played a lot of special teams that need to find their way here at UCLA with limited eligibility. Some of these guys have only a year or so on the offensive line to figure it out, and the Bruins are just stockpiling options. I like that, all right, considering they need something on the O-line. I hope any of them work out. I hope they all have the opportunity to. Now, what is something else UCLA is going after? With all these 20 recruits, you've got 5 offensive linemen. You've got a quarterback in Joey Aguilar, who it seems like some of you disagree with my opinion about Aguilar. I think he will, if you don't like him, he will surprise you. Yes, he will turn over the football. But what UCLA's seen has been turnovers the last couple of years without the production. And that's what I think Aguilar is going to bring. He does need options. So UCLA's got in Mikey Matthews from Cal. They had Jadon Wilson from Arkansas. They have not brought in a transfer running back. They have kind of made a couple of calls, made some inquiries as to some of these kids, but nobody has truly felt out UCLA at the running back position. The one spot, though, as I mentioned in the open, tight end. UCLA has offered a tight end, Rohan Jones. All right, he posted, hey, I got offered from UCLA, just like all these kids are getting offers. All these players continuing to get offers. And Jones, from Montreal, he just finished his junior year, 6'3", 235-pound tight end. Jones, who started his career at Maine in a couple of years, has caught a touchdown, 6 touchdowns in 2 years at Maine. And you're like, okay, that's at Maine. Well, then in January of 2024, transferred to Montana State. And what did he do at Montana State? A team that was unbeaten until the FCS National Championship game for a very good Bobcat squad that was run first. Their quarterback, who was, I believe, the best player in the FCS, he was a run first QB. With this tight end, Rohan Jones, he had 9 touchdowns in close to 14, 15 games. 9 touchdowns, 30 receptions, 470 yards receiving. All right, 9 touchdowns. You'd be hard-pressed to see somebody in UCLA get a red zone target like that. He's not eating it up with 10 receptions. This isn't Brock Bowers, although he does have a 70-yard catch to his resume this year. He did have a 93-yard game. He's the guy that you're going to go find for 10 to 15 yards. And when you're in the red zone, when it came to Montana State this year, they found him, and they found him often. Against North Dakota State, 3 catches and a touchdown grab. In the quarters, 2 or a couple in late November, couple grabs against Montana in the Brawl of the Wild, and then a touchdown. Prior to that, 3 receptions, 58 yards for a touchdown against UC Davis. So he put in the production needed just about every game. There's only one game, this tight end, Jones, that he played in this year where he didn't have a reception. And the majority of them involved getting touchdown catches. Now, we're going to miss Maliki Mataval. The Bruins after having the injury to Hudson Habermill, went and got Bryce Pierre in the portal last year. He had a couple of nice grabs. But the Bruins, one of those positions I'd like to go see them attack, and they've put some other phone calls out there for some guys. But now that his season is over after the FCS National Championship game where the Bison won again, surprise, surprise, Montana State's a really good program. And if they found this guy, and UCLA, I saw Jerry Neuheisel already follow him, that means he's got his eyes out for talent in the future. This is another player that could translate into a red zone option for the Bruins. So look at that name, Rohan Jones. Not sure if there's a crystal ball there. Don't think there is. This is new. He just went in the portal. The Bruins offered him, but he's closer to the West Coast. And maybe the Bruins, if you're trying to find those D1 transfers, maybe if you're going after the FCS to FBS transfers, find those players in the Big Sky Conference, which is loaded with talent, some of which are going to either Montana or, in this case, Montana State. So look for Jones as a guy UCLA to hit up heavily. And if they get him, that would be the red zone touchdown target for Joey Aguilar in this upcoming season to hopefully replace the production we're losing from Maliki Matadao. Next, we're talking about UCLA and their new chancellor, Julio Frenk. What's he going to do? What can he impact? We'll talk about what he did at Miami again and how UCLA kind of screwed him with what they did prior to him becoming the full-time chancellor on January 1st. Did Rocket Money help find any subscriptions you could have forgot about or paying for twice? Well, it's definitely happened for me because I've had a couple of subscriptions where I'm like, what am I paying this for? Why am I paying for this right now? And Rocket Money can help track down all those unwanted subscriptions or those ones you're paying twice over for. And it's having a personal assistant for your finances, whether it's monitoring your spending, those unwanted subscriptions for all these streaming services, right? And then you've got, how do you lower your bills? How do you put all your savings, put that all in one place? Well, that's what Rocket Money can do, and it's helped over 5 million users save over $500 million in canceled subscriptions and more, all getting almost each member up to $740 a year that's saved when using the app's premium features. So check out Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. Again, cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, so with New Year's Day having come and gone, it's now heading into the second full week of the new year in 2025. Julio Frenk is now the official UCLA chancellor. They had the interim. It was after Gene Block, a little interim 2 years there. Julio Frenk, if you don't remember, was the president at the U at Miami, helped them reach substantial financial goals in terms of fundraising. Some of their basketball teams, the men's and the women's teams, both reached significant new heights. And that was with him as the supportive president. And then you've seen like Jim Larinaga for Miami, their coach, seeing all the nonsense in this NIL day and age. He stepped down. He stepped down from Miami. And then you've got Frank, who was a president, pretty much, I would like to believe, is more pro athletics, did a lot of things, helped bring a lot of new things to Miami. And as the chancellor of UCLA, has a chance from literally the top to go to bat if the UC regents decide to do anything stupid. Like how they're paying, UCLA's paying $10 million to Cal annually, right? Lots of money in the Cal money just because UCLA went to the Big Ten, even though Cal is now in the ACC, still stupid. And then the other thing that happened before he became full-time chancellor, even though we knew all this switcheroo was going to happen, UCLA went out there and had an approved contract extension for Martin Jomond, the UCLA athletic director. And I'm not going to go here, and I know you guys are going to sit there and like, oh, we're going to critique his job. The idea is UCLA extended their AD's contract through 2029. All right. Say this was happening like the NFL. This is like, right, the day and age where they're firing their GMs, they're firing their coaches. They're going to go hire these new people to lead these teams into the drafting process, right? Well, why would you let your GM extend your coach for like 10 years, 15 million, something crazy, right? That's not the money he's getting. But why would you let this dude make the decision that can help or hurt your future, knowing full well you're getting rid of him? Well, it's not the same full analogy because Gene Block was retiring, and then you had an interim, which was Darnell Hunt as the interim chancellor for UCLA. And now, after the initial contract from 2020 to 2026, UCLA has extended Jarmond to 2029. All right. And that was agreed upon. How do you let that happen? All right. You sit here and you're like, all right, Frenk, he's got a whole list of things he's going to probably push for, deal with, because sometimes the higher you go up in standing as a leader, you just have to deal with more problems. In this case, more money, more problems. UCLA, of course, athletically, you have to deal with the deficit. You got to deal with the cow money. You got to deal with how are we going to raise money in this NIL era and be more of a athletics supportive figure. All right. I know they did make the move to the Big Ten, but how do you push more support, more love, get more people in the seats at the Rose Bowl? Address the people's concerns of, hey, we want an on-campus stadium. Is that feasible? Is that realistic? Why did we not have the money or have the support to go get Chip Kelly and get rid of him when the time came and have to wait to get Deshaun Foster at the end there? I'm hoping Julio Frenk is the new chancellor as he's taken over on January 1st can do that. Look at his fundraising successes he had at Miami and the support he brought and how some of these Miami programs have seen a lot more support and success in recent years. All right. Now, a private institution, the U versus a public UC, is going to be a very different challenge as a chancellor as well. Just, I wonder how that's going to change. And is he hamstrung? Is he handcuffed, if you will? Is he stuck? Because UCLA already made a move saying, we want this guy to stay longer without giving him the chance to analyze the situation. Now, did they call him and say, yes, we want his opinion? I'm not sure about that. If they did, okay, then they had 1, 2, 3, 4, many different opinions. I'm not entirely sure if that happened, but it would have looked better if UCLA at least waited until 2025 when this guy had come in and that could have been negotiated, or it looked like his move, as opposed to doing it in the in-between stage and announcing that when there was an interim chancellor in place. All right. Now, this isn't a full, I'm going to go yell at Jarmond and critique him at this moment. It's just, why would you handle it that way? I think that was a mistake for how this transition was handled and how UCLA support athletics is going to look in case UCLA does make a change. Then you just paid this guy more money, extended his contract if Frenk doesn't like the way things are going in the next year or two, right? You've got Mick Cronin calling out players. You've got all these loud voices wanting to say UCLA football is going nowhere, UCLA basketball, yada, yada. The women doing great. How are these other sports? UCLA baseball almost got kicked out of their stadium, and they basically are getting kicked out of their stadium. That's a lot of things from the top down that he's going to have to deal with while handling the new media rights money, how to disperse it and use it in the right ways, and just get rid of the deficit, all right? It'll be interesting to see how he handles that. But you know who's handling business quite well? The UCLA women. The number one team in the country, unbeaten in Big Ten play, atop all the polls, should be the unquestioned team as the number one team in the country. And then they're in a stretch where they're going to dominate these next couple of opponents. They should. Winless teams in the Big Ten, and they just dominated Purdue. Let's talk about that one next on Locked On UCLA. All right, wrapping things up here on a Thursday, January 9th, UCLA women's basketball, one of 3 unbeatens in the Big Ten, one of 2 unbeatens in overall records when you include UCLA and Ohio State. Maryland actually just took a close, narrow loss, I believe, at home to USC. The Trojans barely beating them in a close one. So that means when the Bruins go play the Terps, it will be a battle. Maryland 4-1, 14-1 overall. UCLA still has to play Ohio State, who's 15-0, 4-0. And, of course, the challenge that Coach Gottlieb, Juju Watkins, and USC presents later this year, not once but twice, in the Battle of Los Angeles. That will be highlighted when we get there. But until then, UCLA 5-0, 16-0 overall, 7-0 at home, 5-0 in true road games, and 4-0 in neutral site games, because UCLA's played in Hawaii, they played in San Francisco, and they played in Paris, and soon they'll be playing in the Coretta Scott King Classic against Baylor, which will be their next tough game. But until they get there, they're going to have what I believe to be a couple of cupcakes. UCLA just beat down Purdue, who's 7-8, 0-4 in Big Ten play. They're going to play Penn State, who's 0-5 in Big Ten play, 9-7 overall, and then take on a Northwestern team that's 7-9, 0-5 in Big Ten play. So you've got 3 consecutive winless teams on your Big Ten schedule before you go back east for UCLA. A 3-game swing where you get Rutgers, who is a winless team. You'll play currently at this moment when I record this 13-3 Baylor team. And then you've got UCLA at the end of that East Coast swing where they're there for a week plus in 3 games to play Maryland, their toughest, biggest, most national, the one that's got the most national headlines for UCLA on the women's basketball side. So what did they do against Purdue? 83-49. Well, remember last year, UCLA started the season off against Purdue, and that's when they absolutely blasted them at Pauley Pavilion. It was a Big Ten preview, if you will, on opening night. So it's good to see how UCLA went to Indiana, swept the Indiana schools in the Hoosiers and Purdue. And this one was, there's no doubt. Indiana, a scrappy team, pretty good. And if they hit a bunch of threes and used the home crowd to their advantage, could have made it closer than an 11-point win for UCLA. Purdue just, I don't think, had that same size. They just don't have what Indiana had to keep it close. What did UCLA do in this game? Lauren Betts, 5 of 8 shooting, 17.7 rebounds. It's just amazing that she can get 8 shots off, shoot close to 55, 60%, lead the country in that category, and just consistently put out numbers that gets her almost a 20-10 every time she plays, only in 22 minutes. Kiki Rice in this game, 17 minutes, 11 points, 4 rebounds. Okay, then we see London Jones, who is slowly catching fire. Again, mixing and matching the starting lineup was Corey Close, where she brought Jones back in the starting lineup, 25 minutes, 9 points, drilled a few threes. Dugalich, 6 points, 6 boards, 3 assists, a block, 2 blocks, and a steal. You can see how she's becoming more veteran presence and an important piece for UCLA's rotation, not just scoring, because she's not always going to be that 10-point per game scorer. I'm not really sure that's her game, but additional size, a different look, because UCLA can sometimes stretch the floor with Dugalich, and she brings another added rebounding element in addition to her defense when she's playing well. Played 21 minutes. And then you've got Gabby Jaquez, 5 points, 5 boards. UCLA starters in this game didn't even play 3/4 of the game. Yeah, the most minutes played by a starter were London Jones playing 25 minutes, and that's because UCLA wants her to get going and shoot the 3 ball well when the time comes. So in this case, it meant Arnasalo headed to the bench. Arnasalo played 27 minutes. So the player who went from the bench, from the starting lineup to the bench, played the most minutes, and the true freshman point guard, 2 points, 7 assists, 1 turnover. That's a confidence-building performance because we've seen the true freshman have some ups and downs in this season, having to take the challenge on of leading what is now the top-ranked team to face a scrappy Louisville squad in Paris as a starting true freshman point guard when a pretty much consensus All-American Kiki Rice was not available those first few games. And there were a couple of scares in those first few moments before Rice came back. But Arnasalo proved she's a baller. She has gotten high praise from Corey Close. And despite the scoring element not being there against Purdue, you can see the assist numbers running the offense and limiting the turnovers are huge. Now, Purdue is not like a team that you're going to face when you're facing like USC with good guards or Notre Dame that's got some size and some good guards and some top-tier competition, right? But the better you play, the more confidence you build with the youngsters, the more important, the better they'll play later on in the season when you play USC, when you play in the Big Ten tournament, when you go to Maryland, and then when you play in the NCAA tournament, when you get to a Sweet 16 and UCLA just kind of getting over the hump, getting to that Elite Eight and that Final Four for the first time in NCAA history for UCLA program history. Who else had some minutes in this game? We saw some Kendall Dudley getting in this game, Avery Kane, so some newcomers. We saw Saka get 9 minutes. She's been sometimes often used, a little bit banged up as well, coming in as a true freshman. But another key player who scored a bunch of points for UCLA, it came from the bench. You had Gardner come in 4 of 5 from downtown. So the 2 3-point shooters in Jones and Gardner combined to go 7 of 10 from 3. If they're doing that, UCLA is not going to lose a game, and they're probably going to win it by 20 plus. In this case, they won it by close to 35 points. They won it almost by 40 points, and they could have if they really wanted to impress the starters. UCLA was up 16 after the first quarter and up almost 30 at halftime. When your shooters are shooting, man, UCLA is tough to beat. And when Gardner was, good. And that was in 15 minutes, she scored 16 points on 6 of 8 shooting, launching it from downtown. Speak of efficiency in its finest. Then you've got Janiah Barker, who came in, a ball handler, 11 points. So you had 2 double-digit scores from the bench, 2 double-digit scores in the starting lineup, and players building confidence against teams that they should beat and destroy by 30 or 40 points. Now, you might see some eye-popping totals like the USC team who beat Rutgers and was up like 50 at some point in the second half. They're angry they lost earlier this season and got embarrassed in the fourth quarter to Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is really good. But USC had that game at home in the Galen Center and lost that game by double figures, where it should have been a little closer, but Notre Dame controlled it. UCLA in their biggest games, have played without Lauren Betts, won by 50. Set Corey Close becoming the UCLA winningest all-time head coach in women's basketball for program history. And they've just destroyed teams and beaten good teams without some of their best players available. And let's remind you that, hey, Ledger Walker, I think the best player UCLA got in the portal, one of the best players on this roster, was already announced that she's out for the year. She's not even available this year. They got her in the portal knowing she might have to medically redshirt this year. And that is one of the most talented players UCLA has in their program right now. And it's so late in the season, it's like, do you want to burn that year or wait and compete for the next season? So if UCLA continues their dominant, undefeated ways, and they still have Northwestern and Penn State coming up, so UCLA should easily rattle off the winning streak to 18 straight to start the year. You play Baylor on the East Coast in New Jersey. The Bruins should be able to handle that, and then Rutgers. So 3 of their next 4 games against winless teams, 4 of their 5 would have been against winless teams. Baylor would represent a step up in competition. Then you go back down, and then you play Maryland. And I wonder what the focus will be for UCLA. Will they be rusty? Will they be weary? Or will they have enough rest and have adjusted their time clocks, their body clocks, when they go play Maryland in a couple weeks' time on the East Coast when they're there for a week, and that's the last game of a 3-game trip? More of a pro-like schedule as opposed to how it used to be, fly an hour or a couple hours to Arizona or Washington or Oregon and get back. And let me tell you, sometimes those trips to Eugene with poor weather and poor airline service could be rough. But it's different when you're going 5 to 6 hours across the country and then taking the bus, taking the train, dealing with the traffic all the way around town. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I remember the broadcast saying UCLA was late. They're going to have to figure out how to get to these new arenas, these new venues that they're going to play in conference play, and deal with sellout crowds like they will face against Maryland. They had 15,000, close to 15,000 when USC came to town. UCLA is going to see something similar going down the stretch. Now, it's nice to see the Bruins not having to overwork their starters, get the bench players and the deep bench that normally doesn't play, the reserves, if you will, some more minutes and some more confidence. But the Bruins are going to most likely get themselves to 21-0, and then that Maryland game is going to be there, and that's the next one you got to search and circle. I think it's on NBC. It'll be a nationally televised Sunday afternoon game. That is the game to watch. Until then, stay healthy, dominate, and don't let any of these teams pull a fast one on you. And make sure Lauren Betts wins Player of the Year, because she is clearly the most dominant force of women's college basketball, and everybody's turning a blind eye looking to Paige Beckers. Okay, cool. Juju Watkins. Okay, cool. Hannah Hidalgo. All right, they're all going to go look at all these players. Let's not forget Lauren Betts, when she wants to, and UCLA feeds her the ball well, is unstoppable on offense, and the other teams can't score consistently in the paint when she is playing defensively. Dominant both ways. When she's playing 30 minutes. Could have had a 20 and 10 double-double, maybe 20 and 15 if she played 30 minutes in this game against Purdue. But there you go. Until next time, let's get our hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fights. Remember, we're going to react live after the UCLA game on Friday night, January 10th. We'll talk a little bit more about it in the next episode for Locked On UCLA. And hey, can the Bruins respond to Cronin calling them soft? Will the UCLA football team get more recruits? Can they bring in Jones from the portal if possible? All that and more on Locked On UCLA. Like, comment, subscribe, download for your support. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.